All right, we've got several people joining us this morning, or this afternoon, this morning, or this evening, depending on when you're watching and where you're watching it from. I'm Dwayne McNally, and I'll be the host today. And we're joined by Eric Hayes, the MortarStone CTO, and excited for a conversation today on some really key, important feature updates that we've been working on. And Eric and the team have been working overtime to make these available, and we'll be talking about them today. But before we do that, Eric, I'd love you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are and why this matters to you, what MortarStone does matters to you.
Yeah, sure. So I, as a high school student and college student, started my career in a large church in Southern California, and did graphic design, web design, and all kinds of different stuff in the tech side of things, and enjoyed that. And then took a little bit of a detour, went and worked for a school district, then a large software company, and then David, our CEO, kind of reached out and we started talking, and then he ended up poaching me from that larger software company,
And we're
so to
glad he
speak.
did.
Yeah, and then but what drew me to MortarStone was the chance to get to use my talents and skills that God has given me again for the kingdom in some capacity. And so my heart is to make things better for churches. When I worked at that large church in Southern California, it was quite a while ago. I won't date myself, but the quality of software in the church world was not where it is today, and that gave me a little bit of an itch, or a chip on my shoulder, if you will, to like say, okay, I think we can do better, and that motivates me. That drives me on to say I want the church to have nice software, and MortarStone still has a lot of rough edges. I'm my own worst critic, but I think it pushes us forward to make it nicer, make things easier and faster, for all of you. So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's awesome, Eric. And I know actually the focus that you and the development team have this year actually stems from your passion, I believe. So talk a little bit about the focus for this year.
Yeah, so this year we're you'll see today early on with at least one feature that's kind of new to us, but most of our focus is just improvements to the software that we've got, making it clearer and more understandable, more intuitive, work smoother, and just to try to improve the quality of life of all of our churches that are using MortarStone. So yeah, that's our main goal this year. And with that is coming some cool new things that we probably won't get into today, but yeah, that's our desire this year, is to make things better. We've got a lot of features. MortarStone does a lot of things, and we are trying to tie those things together better. And one of the features we're going to talk about today is just that.
Awesome.
So I don't want to get ahead of myself on that, but yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Eric. And before we jump in further, I'm going to launch a poll. And if everyone could just say how long you've been a MortarStone user, that would be great, just to give Eric and I a quick picture about how many people are on the call with us.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in that. It's one of the features we're going to talk about today, is something that has evolved over the entire history of MortarStone. and we're coming out with the next evolution of that. But yeah.
So Eric, I don't know if you can see the results or not, but here they are. So 40% of the people are, I would say, on the newer side, less than a year. About a quarter of them are 1 to 3 years, and everybody else are old timers. 35% are 3 or more
Yeah.
years. And so that gives us a good sense of who the people are on the call with us. And so some of them, as we get into this further, I think will be very clear of as far as what their experience has been and should give us some great insight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And in fact, we plan to leave a good bit of time for questions. So be thinking about questions pertaining to what we're going to show, and of course, anything else that you're curious about. We'll answer as much as we can.
Exactly. And so, Eric, I know we were talking before this about the fact of this is a preview of what's to come. It's not a launch, but it's a preview. And part of the reason for the preview is we know that during the summertime, churches start to get a little bit where people take more time off. And this is something that we as MortarStone are super excited about. We see incredible value coming from this. And the two features that we're going to talk about today, just so you guys know, is our search capabilities as well as a workflow capability. And so that'll be the focus of our conversation today. And we are still working towards the final release of these, but Eric will talk more about the timing and how you guys can start to see you guys can become some of the early adopters in this conversation. But as Eric said, we're going to have a chance for Q&A, or better known as Stump Eric, or Break the Product, however you want to look at that. But we do want to get into that a little bit later on. So Eric, let's just jump in and talk about search. And before we do that, I'm going to launch another poll just to kind of get a sense of what people have experienced. And so the question is have you built a search? Have you attempted to build your own search in the current system? Yes, you were successful. I tried but never got what I wanted, and I never tried.
Yeah. Those of you that have been around for 3 or more years might remember how things were before our current system. I would describe our current system as a power tool that requires a lot of explanation and understanding and etc. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that a lot of you were successful. But we have heard over the years that some of the stuff, well, let me put it this way. Easy searches are probably pretty straightforward to build. There's a lot of power there that is hidden or that isn't immediately apparent. That if you were to email support, ask us, hey, I'm trying to find this, we could help you build it. But yeah, one of the things we set out to do in this new iteration is to make things a lot more intuitive and easier to discover and easier to figure out maybe when something goes wrong, or just easier to understand what's actually happening. So I will share my screen. And talk about this new version of searches that we are bringing out. So this is very much a preview. A lot of it is going to look different when it's finally out. There may be some things that don't work today when I'm showing it to you. But like Dwayne said, we want to get this in front of you before the summer so that you can hit the ground running later in the summer or in the fall, that sort of thing. So I'll dive into it. Creating a new search will show this initially. And the idea here is just to set the foundation, the stage of where we're going to pull households from. Typically, you're going to start with all households, but if you had a list or a workflow, that's the other feature we're going to show here in just a second. You could also pull from that. Of course, you can change your locations, and you can also decide, do I want to include inactive households or households ignored in search? And if you have questions about that, we can answer those at the end, of course. But let me contrast this, in fact, with our current version. And you can kind of get a sense of how, in this one, we kind of show you, here's all the options or most of the options. You kind of have to know how it works to make it work, if I'm honest. With this one, we ask you to add a filter, and then we present you with a lot of options, but they're all described. There's all some idea of what they do. As opposed to here, you kind of have to know what these all do. And so, yeah, initially we're like, we really want to make this more intuitive, and hopefully we are getting close to that mark. And so you can see here all the ways that you can search. Now, one of the things we did is just add a lot more possibilities. We took some of them and broke them apart to make them more clear, that kind of thing. But we added a lot of options, and I'll get into some of that here in a minute. But what a lot of users do, and one of the things we kind of do when you first sign up to MortarStone, is we set up a first-time giver search, and that is not as clear as we would have liked it to be. Sometimes there are things that can't do, that kind of thing. Now it's pretty straightforward. So if I want to find a first, last, second, third, any of those kind of things, I just add a numbered gift filter, and it looks kind of like this. And if I want to find first time gift, and I can say in the last 30 days, it's that easy. And now I'm set up to find my first time gifts. Now that's of any size. One of the things we couldn't do in the old system that we can do now is say, I want to set a minimum threshold. So I only really want to know about people who gave a first time gift if that first gift is at least $100 or more. And so that's now possible with this new system. With this new system, you set it up, you set it to run, and it runs in the background. So I could go to another page while I'm waiting for it. Typically, it's pretty fast, as you can see, and it's done, and I can view those results. And that kind of looks like what you might expect. So here's all my first-time givers in the last 30 days that gave at least 100 or more. One thing we can do here is sort by the amount and get a largest to smallest. And a new feature here that the old system can't do is set a limit. So in any of your searches, you can kind of turn them into a top 100 style search. And now I've only got the top 100. Yeah, so I might get more into that in just a second. Let's go back to setting this up. We can say, we could change this if we wanted to a second time gift in the last 30 days. I think that makes sense. You could do last gift. You can do, I want to find the people who gave for the 5th time in the last 30 days. All those kinds of things are possible. Let's also show another common one. I'm going to delete that and show I'll show the lapsed or retained. This is something in the current system that's definitely possible, and we set them up all the time, but it requires a couple of filters. You have to say, first, figure out when the household was giving, and then decide when they weren't giving. And we kind of rolled that into one, and I'll just do They didn't give last year, but they did give they did give last year and they didn't give this year. This is what we call a lie bunt in the biz. Last year, but not this year. So yeah, again, click run, it runs in the background. If you have a longer search, you don't have to wait for it. Also, if I go somewhere else and come back to it, that's this one right here, it doesn't have to run again. So one of the problems with the current system that we set out to fix is that it runs when the page loads. And that could be slow and frustrating depending on how complicated it is. Or sometimes this doesn't happen a lot, but it is possible to make a search complicated enough that it just never finishes and then it just errors out. And we wanted this system to work differently. So this system runs each part behind the scenes independently and then finishes, and it stores the results. So unless you change the search criteria, it stays the same. Let me let's make this a multi-step search for fun. I'm going to add an age, and let's just say we want to find people who are 50 or older, who are not who are lapsed. Now, in the current system, you have to create the filters in order. And so if I wanted to have this applied first, I'd have to kind of delete the old filter and kind of recreate it from scratch. With this system, I can simply just drag it, new one in place. Now, when I run it, it'll first find the households who are over 50, and then it will apply that lapsed criteria to this 4,000 or so. That's another key useful feature with this new system, is you can see the results from each step. So I can view the results. This is the 159 or so that matched. You can see the age and the giving. Of course, I can sort by age, or I could sort by the amount of giving. But imagine if I didn't expect those results from this last thing. I could also see the results from just the age filter. And this is the 4,000 results from the end. So those are some of the goals that we set out to fix with this new system. We wanted it to be easier to understand, and more reliable, and solve more problems. The way we see searches is it's the way you pinpoint certain givers by a household attribute or a giving behavior. So if our theme is giver journeys for this webinar, you could say, first we find the people that, where are they at in a certain journey? And the next feature, we're going to talk about workflows, and that's going to be about tracking those households and where they're at.
Hey, Eric, someone's asked the question, for a search of households over 50, who in the household is that age based on?
Excellent question. So currently in our system, we get all the ages from your church management system that we can get. So if you have an age for an individual, we import that, and then we try to determine who the head of household is for each household, and that's the age that is used here. So if we can determine those two things, we first will have a date of birth for an individual in the household, and then if we can determine that which person in the household is the head of household. That's kind of how that data comes from your system into ours. Sometimes we don't know the family relationships, in which case we will try to fall back to oldest male in the household becomes the household, or sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes, depending on the system, we don't know who that is, or we don't have a date of birth, that kind of thing. So in this case, this would filter out everybody that we don't have a date of birth for. This gives me a chance to show something interesting that we've added recently, which is a missing or present attribute. So one of the things that comes up is like, hey, I just want to know who are all the people that I don't have addresses for, or emails for, or ages for, so I can do that kind of data cleaning or follow up with them and try to get that from. So this new filter lets us find people that, for instance, nobody in the household has a birth date. And this is demo data, so I don't actually know what the results of this would be, but it should work. Yeah. So it'll find the households that that do not have that particular piece of data. Yeah, and then of course you can layer on things to that. So yeah, good question. That's everyone struggles. Everyone has the problem right now of I don't have as many birth dates as I wish I had. But yeah, so yeah, just kind of as a quick wrap up to this, and we can go back and talk about anything that people are interested in. But this is again a preview. We are finishing up a few of the main pieces of this, but this should be coming out in the summer. It should be available for you to play with in the next few weeks, I think. Just email support and say you're interested. This has got to be everything we build is bug free, of course. This has to be especially stable before, because it's going to replace the old system. The old system currently powers all of our automation, triggers, those kinds of things. This will replace that. So this is going to go through a little bit more testing and polish and whatnot. But it's getting pretty close to being finished, and we expect that to be this summer. Yeah.
So Eric, do you want to go crazy and ask somebody for a search that they would love to see how it's done, a search that they've struggled with, and how would it be done in the new system? And if so, put it into the chat, and
yes.
Eric will go wild and crazy live.
Maybe let's collect those in the chat and come back to them after we preview, just because well, this is one of the things that the new search can do, is do some searching on location data. So imagine if you wanted to find your top givers that are within 10 miles of one of your campuses, that kind of thing. But in our demo data, that doesn't really work. So if you wanted something, if you wanted us to do a search on your actual data, we'd be happy to do that with your permission. So yeah, put that in the chat, and maybe we'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, and we've got one already, search for faithful givers over the last 12 months. So
okay,
that would be, but yeah, put them in and then we'll come back. So Eric, let's talk about the other one, and I've got a poll for that as well. And
okay,
we're going to be talking about really a workflow feature that we've added to the system, and that we're going to be launching. And so before we do that, let me launch the poll, and it's just basically the question of, how are you tracking giver progress? you don't, we use your church management system or you're using another tool.
While we're waiting on that, I am going to show a little bit of how these kind of tie together. So this is a search that has some first-time givers. And I am going to...
And Eric, I just shared the results.
Okay.
So just
Awesome.
about
Okay.
60% are do it through their CHMS, and the others are split. So right about 20% to they don't, and they use another tool.
Okay, cool. So this is workflows. I'm going to show you one that's kind of got something to it first, and then I'll show you a blank slate. But the idea here, well, let me compare this maybe to your church management system. We're not our not so secret mission at MortarStone is to get you to be more intentional about how you meet and talk to and disciple your givers. And so we wanted a kind of generalized tool that would allow people to categorize and track where folks are along their journey. So it could be a giver journey. It really could be any journey you can imagine. Or I just want to put people into 5 different buckets, and then, whatever you can imagine. We tried to make a generalized tool enough for that sort of thing. But of course, there are some very specific use cases that we think most people will have. One of which might be a new giver workflow, and so you might have several steps here. You can imagine. I just put all the first-time givers that I just found with the new searches into step 1 here. So that's kind of how these things would tie together. And I'll just show you some of the features, one of which is it's just real easy to call this. I'll just call this 1TG, and I can just rename these steps. If I wanted to reorder them, it's that easy to do that. But you can imagine here might be, okay, our first-time givers, we want to give them a phone call, or we might want to send a card to follow up with them. And then we want to see, did they make a second-time gift? Or maybe no second gift, right? So then you can imagine how you have this kind of workflow set out. And maybe we talk to this person, right? You got your contact information at your fingertips. And, maybe we sent the card for them, and we can just click and drag folks into the next step. And you can see where they're at just by clicking. Now, one of the things, again, going back to, we're trying to take the things we've got, time together better. We've got lots of features. Let's improve the way they work together. We've got a thing called lists, which lets you put folks into a bucket, so to speak, and save that bucket and do mass actions on that. You can send people emails from our system from that list. There's lots of things you can do with our lists. But those lists are kind of a singular Lego piece, if you will. Then we have things called tasks, and we've got notes and all these pieces. And sometimes in our system, it's hard to know, okay, where do I go first? On a daily basis, where do I go and actually do the work of my generosity ministry? How am I going in and checking on where folks are at in a process? So this brings a lot of those features together. So behind the scenes, these steps are lists like we've had before, but this brings them together in a flow. And this is a single place where you could do follow-up. So I want to talk to the Perry family. And I can click here and I can add a note. And I can set a follow-up task with a quick, just a check. And let's say that's done. Now that will show up under their household view. There's my test note. And there's a task to follow up with the Perry family. It defaulted to 2 weeks from now, but you can change those kinds of things. And so this is a quick follow-up tool. If I click on this again, I see the last note that I made, and I can make a new one. You know, I can track the conversations that are happening and set follow-ups and have that kind of, okay, we did step 1, now they're in step 2, how do we get them to step 3 kind of idea. And that's what all these numbers are. Let me make the screen bigger just to make sure you guys can see. The idea here is we can track the progress that's being made. So let me just throw some folks into another step. A couple steps. You can see as I do that, these numbers update, and I say, okay, 91% is still in the first step, but I'm moving 2% through the whole process, you could say, right? So then you can start tracking, okay, do we need to adjust some of what we're doing, and so on and so forth. And then here to the left, there's the everyone panel, and you can see I've got 71 people in here. If I wanted to search the whole workflow, I can do that here and find someone, and I can see what step they're in. If I click this, it just kind of jumps to that step. Here I can also search for anyone and quickly find them there, and then of course drag them. That kind of brings me to one of the things we set out to do, and we're not necessarily trying to replace your church managed system. We're not trying to force you to work in 2 systems all the time. We're trying to provide something that is a better fit for the kinds of workflows that we think a generosity ministry is going through. So with our system, we looked at a few of the things that church managed systems do, and we set out to design ours to be better at handling a lot of people. So you could have 10,000 folks in each step, and it doesn't, it doesn't get cumbersome to use, or it doesn't get more cumbersome, at least, to use. And also, it's very generalized. It's not only for paperwork or an HR process, or filling out forms at each step, or one person at a time kinds of things. It's meant to support the idea. Okay, I might move a lot of people through a workflow.
And Eric, I think, when I think back to what I did at my previous job as an XP, we did something similar to this. We used Trello for similar features to be able to track progress of people through various steps. I think one of the things I love about the tool is multiple of these steps can actually be driven off of the search capabilities that you just showed. And so they can be kept evergreen through that way, as well as moving people from one step to the next. And so I think there's some richness in the capabilities that we didn't have either on the whiteboards that we tracked it on, or in Trello, or something else that we used.
Yes, Trello was very much a inspiration for this. Just I've got my columns, and I'm clicking and dragging folks through that process. And so yeah, we had the situation where we couldn't have we couldn't show you 10,000 listings. We couldn't do exactly like Trello,
Yeah.
but that's if you're familiar with Trello, that's kind of our inspiration here. You know, what are people maybe doing, and how do we do that? So,
Yep. Hey, and Eric, before I forget, was notified that our chat feature is actually disabled in this webinar, and I'm
oh
not
no,
smart enough to figure out how to undo that. So use the Q&A feature for any questions or any searches that you'd like, or
yeah,
any
sorry,
other
folks.
feedback, and then we'll go from there. So sorry about that, folks.
Yeah. Okay. So imagine you want to get all your folks through Financial Peace University, something like that. And I'm just going to demo how you can add households. There's lots of ways to add folks to your workflow. I'll just add a few real quick. But yeah, this is one way you can see. Okay, we invited these folks, then they attended. Then we want to see what the kind of the result of that is down the road. And you can, Dwayne just touched on this. One of the things we are developing for launch with this feature is you can automate each of these steps. So in the same way, today our triggers will find first-time givers, put them in a list. We'll be able to attach a trigger to each of these steps. So you can imagine first-time givers going in there automatically, and then if they give a second time, we'll move them from step 1 to step 2, so on and so forth. Or with something like this, if I tagged folks that actually attended, if in my church managed system I tagged folks that attended, that could automatically move them to that next step. And there's going to be different ways to handle that kind of automation. But if you wanted to move your entire church through this kind of process, you could, without having to one at a time add everybody. You could use our searches to populate the different steps and move hundreds or even thousands through a process like that.
Which I know looks like that was a question that a couple people were asking, that because in this one, Eric, so like we could come up with a scenario of, here's the people that we want to invite. They're new people to the church, or they're, we could work through that. We could put the list in there, and then you could be able to say, as you said, attended. That's going to be more of a manual piece about how many of the invites actually attended. But then you could create something that says, hey, people who gave for a first time out of that list, out of the invite list or out of the attended list, you could create some capabilities for that, right? So that you could do that, or that they increase their giving year over year as a result of attending, or whatever. You could build some of those capabilities into your workflow, so you could actually easily see the impact that having FPU was having in the lives of people.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So let me maybe try and quickly demo that. Let's
I'm not trying
see.
to cause you to be the stump Eric question here.
No, I'm going to try and answer another question on the fly here. Maybe kind of think about it. The question was, do you have to add people one at a time to a workflow? I'm going to find anyone who gave at least 100 in the last in the trailing 12 months. This is with my demo data. So it's probably not exactly trailing 12, but with the idea. I can view the results here. Let's see, what did we had about 3,600 results. And then I can add them to the workflow that I just made, FPU process. It'll ask me what step to add. I'll just put that there. And now I've got that 3,600 in that first step. Now, one of the rules for a workflow is that a household is only in one step at a time in the workflow. So, you know, if you already have 10 people in that first step and you add another 1,000, you might have 1,005, right? But you see that's because 5 of them were already in the workflow. So yeah, at this point, we can move folks along. We can even, if, oh yeah, and then let's do this. I will kind of chain these IDs together. So I've got my, that was that search. Let's do a new one. And in this case, we'll start with a workflow. So my FPU process, I'm going to add a filter. And I'm going to say who had a giving change, an increase of, let's say, 50%. And I'm going to quickly put in a date range without thinking about it too much, which I don't know what the results will be, but we're going to speed up this kind of process of putting in dates. But oops, I'm actually going to, I know this is really exciting. Okay, let's see what this does. Okay, so we're going to pull folks that are in that FPU workflow we just kind of threw together, and we're going to see which one of those had an increase of 50% over last year, over last calendar year is basically what it is. So we found 165. I'm going to view those results, and then I'm going to add these folks to a list. I'm going to add them to the same workflow. This is something, okay. I want to move those folks. So it says, hey, 165, they're already in the workflow. I want to move them to that step 3. And now I've used searches to do this kind of mass effect, right? So I moved 165 or so of those folks that had that increase to that last step. So yeah, that's kind of the round trip idea, is we're building tools to process a lot of folks at a time. That's one of the aspects of this, but also very targeted, if that makes sense.
Yep, Eric, that's really good. I know one of the questions out here is for the invite, can you export the report for use to invite via email?
Yes. So we want to make that a lot simpler, but let me show you how this is possible already. I kind of touched on the idea that behind the scenes, these steps are lists. So anything that you can do with a list today, you can do with workflow steps when that comes out. So here is that list. It's all the same people. And if I wanted to email them from the system, I can select all and I can do an email. Or if you want to just export them, that is right here, and you can export to CSV, or you can export. We support like a MailChimp import or a Constant Contact. Those kinds of things should be compatible with this export for Mail Client. The export to CSV still has the emails in it, but it also has a lot of other columns for use. So yeah, that's the idea there.
Great. So another question, and this is back to more of a household view, Eric, is if the husband attends FPU and the wife did not, how would that be treated in that workflow?
Right. Yes, that's a good question. if you wanted to know things at an individual level, you might have to go look at the household itself. That's a good question that we might not be able to easily solve on a very large basis. If you had, 100 or 1,000 of those that you wanted to find, we might have to build something to solve that. But if it was one household, like this household, this is the .org family. Don't read
that's
too
a
much
great
into this.
family.
It's a very randomized stuff here, but you can see here, we can look at an individual this way. So I can look at IRA here, and if depending on your church management system, if we import the tags and they're attached to the individual, you can see them here. So the answer is it's possible to tease that out on a individual basis, but maybe not in a large swath right now. And if that's a thing you're like, hey, I've got this particular use case, really help me, email support about that, and we'd be happy to work with you on that, either with creating a new feature or maybe doing something behind the scenes. Okay, I think the last questions are things we can do by actually building a search, or at least we can attempt to. One of which is sometimes we have a first-time givers that gives to multiple funds with their first gift. So how can we get the second-time giver report to recognize? Okay, yes. Okay, excellent. So this is, I'm glad you asked this, because this is a kind of a topic of internal debate right now in our dev team. And what happens is when we import from most of your systems, if someone on their first day gives to 2 funds, we count those as 2 donations. They're on the same day, they might be on 2 different funds, etc. And a lot of our things right now are just we count like a second gift. Hey, this is first time gift. If they have 2 gifts, they gave a second time, right? It's that kind of simple. And one of the things we're discussing and starting to put in place is a concept of a giving day. Let me show an example of that. Well, actually, let me do the actual second time gift. I'll just say in the last 30 days. What we'll do is with the new system, we actually find their second gift. With the current system, we count 2 gifts in the period. And then it's a very nuanced idea. Most of the time, counting 2 gifts in the period solves or finds people that gave a second time. For this particular case, and I'm glad you asked this because this comes up. For this particular case, you're right. It just finds, oh yeah, they only gave on 1 day. We want to know that they came back and gave. This one will actually find the second gift. Now, what we're talking about internally is finding the second giving day, not just the second gift. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's very in the weeds kind of idea.
So the key thing that when we've talked about this, Eric, is the fact that what's happening is if someone gives to 3 funds on 1 day and does it via separate checks or whatever, that may look as 3 separate gifts, as opposed to the fact that really it's just 1 gift split into 3 different paths. And so the giving day actually then turns into 2 weeks later, they give 1 check to one of those funds. That then becomes the second giving day as opposed to the second gift.
Right. Let me show another. hopefully a quick example of total giving. Just say it's probably run that search. Only found a few. Let's see if this actually does what I'm thinking. One of the things that we added is with our current system, sometimes a filter comes with multiple columns, and you can kind of get this situation where there's too much to see, and it kind of overflows. With this one, you can choose which columns you see here. So this isn't showing what I wanted it to show. So let me change this, maybe get a lot more results. And then I'll show you the difference between what we're going to start calling giving days and and gift count. So here's one example. This individual has 2 gifts technically, but only 1 giving day. And we can, let's sort by giving days. And you can kind of maybe see this, maybe more pronounced. So this Lindsay here has 5 different giving days, but 7 actual gifts. So hopefully that kind of answers your question in a roundabout way, that we are starting to think in those terms. And yeah, I'd like to talk more with you about that, but I think we're starting to go in that direction and provide tools to get that. Okay, actually, they came back on a separate day. We might actually even tweak our current that number gift filter to do the separate giving days, because my sense is that people most of the time want that rather than, no, I literally want the second gift that they gave. So yeah, I appreciate the question, because that helps us get closer to what we're trying to get in the end.
And Eric, we have about 5 minutes left. If there's one thing you want to show, but I do want to make sure we give a chance for you to talk for a moment about when they can win and how they can get some more information on this. And then I do have a simple poll just to get some feedback from people on what they saw today.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so yeah, the answer to when we'll see this is workflows. A lot of you might already have that turned on, and that could see some changes in the next few weeks. But that is in what we call private beta, where you just contact support. We could turn that on for you if you want to play with it. Then it'll move into what we would call public beta, where under settings and under new feature preview, that'll be listed there, and you can turn it off and on as you want. And then it'll be what we call general availability, which is it's just on for everybody, and it's just a feature that's there. With searches, there are a few more things to work out before we could turn that on for you. Things like exports, and there's a couple of known problems that we need to work out. I'll just tease this. One of the things that gets requested a lot is the idea of an OR filter. I want people that have this tag or meet this other criteria, and I want an OR, and that is coming, but it's not working today. Otherwise, I would have shown it to you. So that's the kind of thing we're going to finish up before it's something we can turn on for you to start playing with. The other thing we're going to figure out is how to transfer all your current searches into the new system, so you don't have to rebuild them all. But yeah, so all these things are probably coming out this summer. That's our goal for all of these features. They're pretty close, like you've seen. So we think they'll be ready for you to play with this sometime this summer.
And because we know who's actually attending the webinar and who's actually registered for this, Eric, we'll be reaching out directly to you guys when these pieces become available, so you guys can know that as well. But as Eric said, the workflow piece is available for if you want to reach out to support or Mike Martin or Kent Singletary based upon who you have interacted with on the, or Joe for that matter, they can help you with getting that set up.
Yes, we have, I think, 50 to 60 churches that have that on or are playing with that in some fashion. Yep.
So Eric, before we finalize, let me just do this, and it's basically just tell us what you think about what Eric has talked about today. We're excited about them. We hope you are too, but let's just kind of get a sense. And so basically, what do you think? They're great. I can't wait to get my hands on them. Nice, but I don't know how I'll use them, or I'll have to see it before I can decide. If you're from Missouri, go for it and go from there.
Yeah. Okay. So while we're waiting for those results, I'll quickly answer the last two questions. The harder one is the idea of faithfulness. And we introduced not too long ago this idea of a giving score. And that's something we track for each household, things like frequency, tenure, or the monetary rank. So how much they give in relation to others. A little bit different in band. I won't get into that. But if we wanted to say, okay, who gives monthly?
And Eric, while you're in the middle of that, real quick, just so you know, the majority of people said these are great. We can't wait. So in other words, hurry up, Eric, and get these out.
Yeah. Let me just do this. And so this would track folks that give about monthly to weekly or more. And actually, yeah, there are dates that we can set with this. I'll just say in the past year, they kind of held that result. And so then that would find based on that score. And there's a couple caveats with that score. We have to calculate that ahead of time to be able to do that at any given time range. And so that you can't change the fund for that on the fly. If you have more questions about that, I can tell you about that, but this would find folks that are quote unquote faithful. You can match that with a tenure, the tenure score. So, they've been around for at least a year. And that would say a year and they're this frequent. And that's our idea of faithfulness. And you can layer that with other stuff. And then real quickly for that last thing, you can, of course, contact us about any of these for more. But that last one about a zero or no giving, we've got this new filter that's a zero giving filter. And that would be, you could say in the last 90 days, they have zero giving. And you could run that. And you can layer that with they had giving before, or they had this tag, or, you can layer this with other stuff and find folks that have no giving. Now, the thing about this particular filter is this is going to catch people that have never given as well. So that's why this one is special without getting into the weeds with that. Again, contact us at support or contact Mike or Kent if you want to know any more about these, and we'd be happy to get into that with you.
Yep. So, Eric, thank you very much for joining us. This is exciting.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I think as you saw from the feedback, people are excited about this. We knew they would be because these are things that that I think we're all trying to sort through how to solve and how to engage our people more effectively. So thank you. Thank you for everyone who came and joined us today. This has been hopefully a great and enlightening conversation. And, if you have further questions, obviously reach out to us. And you guys will be hearing a lot more about this as we go and as they become available. We see these as really two really big features and excited for that. And Eric and the team are also working on some other things that they have up their sleeve that we're not going to talk about today. And so stay tuned and come back because we'll be talking about more of those things. So everybody, thank you. And this will end the webinar and we'll catch up next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.